Ine po Ramona Beltrán Tindeac, Mala Indoin, Consuela Castro Beltrán Tindeac, Denver, California. Quiero dar las gracias al Creador por un día más de vida. My name is Ramona Beltrán. I am Yaqui, Mexica, originally from northern Mexico. My family came up during the revolution. I'm also an assistant professor in the Graduate School of Social Work. And I just want to welcome you all back to the final panel today. Thank you all for being here. I also want to give thanks and acknowledge Cheyenne Arapaho ancestors and descendants who are here, welcoming us to your land. Thank you. As a Native woman and a guest on your land, I am really honored to be here and also to be a part of this important work. So I think the panels so far have been really powerful. I had to miss a little bit of the last one, but I think that this is a little bit of a shift in tone, though the depth will continue to remain. Well, before we get into the shift in the content, I wanted to first frame that content by asking Joe to offer a prayer for us. Thank you for that blessing, for us to close up this important symposium in a good way. This work that has taken us quite a bit of time, but is a lifetime ahead of us as well. So before I pass the microphone down and ask our panelists to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their commitments to the path forward, I just want to talk a little bit about historical trauma and an indigenous epistemology, an indigenous way of thinking about healing as it involves all of us. So historical trauma is a collective and cumulative wounding across generations, and it's passed down over time. But it's also cumulative in that it's something that doesn't just happen at a one-time event, but that one-time event is the spirit that carries forward. And it's compounded by daily experiences of discrimination, of historical erasure. And as Native people, we live with that every single day. But we are also incredibly resistant, as Dr. Stratton was, resilient. We're incredibly resilient. Dr. Stratton was talking earlier about survivance, that we have resisted and we remain despite the efforts to get rid of us. But the important thing for us to consider when we think about healing from historical trauma is the notion from an indigenous point of view that all things are connected. Everything is connected, from the land to the rocks, to the trees, to the air that we breathe, and all of our relatives, regardless of shade or tribe or origin. So I say that because we are all implicated in the healing of this process. While Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Native people have suffered massacres and genocide directly and have a lot of clear healing that we have to do on our own through our ceremonies, through our communities, those who are non-Native, who are descendants of those who perpetrated those events, also have a path forward of healing as well. And all of us who are on these lands have a path forward of healing. So I just wanted to think about that as a frame for how we can all participate. And this is our ancestral inheritance. All of us have an ancestral inheritance, a legacy that we need to heal from. And not that long ago, well actually it was kind of a while ago in the scope of my life, I think about 15 years ago, I heard a Native man say, in order for a wound to heal, it needs to be lanced to the quick. And that really stuck with me, that we can't heal from these wounds until we get down to the very bottom of them, until we cut so deep that we get to the core, the origin. And as is true with physical wounds, spiritual, social, cultural, historical wounds need to be cut to that deepest layer. And they don't heal quickly. Often we need to let them breathe, give them air, and heal slowly, layer by layer. And the deepest of wounds will always leave scars. So I think it would be hasty and perhaps even a replication of a colonial process to expect that there are easy, concrete, operationalized steps to do this work. I myself look to what I call moments of light amidst the healing process. It's big, it's deep, it's heavy, but we have so many moments of light and joy. And perhaps we have small answers to big questions. So in that spirit of healing these deep wounds and moments of light, just want to pass the microphone down and ask you to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your commitments to this path forward or your thoughts about the path forward. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Laurel Hayden and I'm a second-year graduate student at the University of Denver, Joseph Corbell School. I'm studying international human rights, and I'm also the great-great-great-granddaughter of John Evans, who is the founder and also culpable and involved in the Sand Creek Massacre. So I'll share a little bit more in a bit, but I'll just pass it down.
My name's Henry Lelandberg Sr. And I have a pretty large family. We come from a chief family. And our families had went through a lot of stuff from these massacres, and all the treaties they signed was only signed by a few of our grandfathers. And most of our tribe didn't agree with them. They let them off to be massacred. So a lot of the healing is, a lot of our families suffered from the other Indian people. They were mad. Why didn't you bring us here to get massacred? Why? You know, they thought they were doing good things, but the government had lied to them. So one of the healing parts there is our family suffered quite a bit. Our chief family. Chief Bull Bear, Chief Little Raven signed these treaties. And then one of the last treaties they signed in 1867 was Medicine Lodge. They was going to give us a place in Kansas. Well, Grandpa didn't want to stay there, so he went to Oklahoma and signed another treaty to have a government with the Cheyennes. And little did we know they was going to stick us on land that's probably worse than Kansas. They gave us all the gyprock, all the bad land that you can't farm. But I believe a lot of families survived on it anyway. Otherwise we wouldn't be here. But our healing is still in process. It seems like if you go away, that it doesn't. My brother over here was talking about his son. He was telling me. Well, I have a story that's kind of similar to that. I wasn't telling my grandson anything. He was listening. We were riding down the road. I'd come back from a meeting. He would listen. He was 4.5. So when it was time for him to go back and stay with his mother, he told her, "Can I tell you something, Mama?" She goes, "What is it?" "Did you know the white people killed all my grandpa's Indians?" And she said, "Why did you say that?" He said, "Because they didn't want us on the land anymore. That's why they're all under the ground now." 4.5-year-old little boy knows. And that's a gift. And like he said, we're going to have to keep telling it. No matter how bad the story is, we're going to have to tell a story the way we heard it. We'll have to let the kids know. One time my daughter came home. She was crying. She said, "They're calling me Indian. They're making sounds." Well, I told her, well, you're probably the most important kid in that class. You're one out of 3,000 kids. All the rest are dead. They're trying to save panda bears. They're trying to save other things. That's 3,000, 2,000. Well, check out these Arapaho Indians. There's 3,000 Indians here. Why don't they do something to preserve our way of life? Why don't they make way for us where we can grow? But they don't. You know, they want us to fit right in, and maybe one day they won't recognize us. But I'm proud to say all my grandchildren are Indians. And I have 13 grandkids, 8 children, 5 wives. No. Thank you.
An Indian name, Big Medicine, because that's where we come from, my family. Our real name should be Spreener. So that means that we're part Arapaho, part Cheyenne, and part Pioneer. Part Pioneer, part white. That's where I come from. There's a lot of people that where our ceremonies get ready to start up pretty soon, about 2 weeks. Our Sundance ceremonies, which I help run. There's a lot of people back home knows we're up here. They don't know what for because they don't read our emails, but we ain't got nothing on hard drive. But I have to go make some copies and stuff like that and run it back to our government to do that every trip. So, well, I'm just happy to be here today because learn about what this research has done. Gary Roberts' report and all that, to read all that history and stuff like that. Learn more. I'm learning more. I've been working on this 22 years, but I still learn more every time I come to a meeting like this. So, that's it. Oh.
My name is Ann Hayden, and I am the great-great-granddaughter of John Evans. He is only one of 8 great-great-grandfathers, however, so there are lots of lineages in our family. But before I say anything else, I wanted to speak such gratitude for the first prayer that was offered this morning that spoke to the ancestors of this land. And as part of that, it feels really important to me that I ask permission of you here, of you from the Arapaho tribes, you from the Southern Cheyenne, and you, Gail, from the Northern Arapaho, to have permission for our family members to be here on this land. Sure. Because that's something that our great-great-grandfather never did. And if they had had that mindset back then to do that, we wouldn't be here today speaking in the ways we are. We would be doing something else. And there would be many more descendants of the Cheyenne and Arapaho around. I will say more later, but thank you all for your permission for us to be here with you. It is such an honor.
Thank you. I heard some scary things today. One was that if it wasn't for Sand Creek, John Evans would have been President of the United States. That's a scary thought. That somebody that is so driven by a political agenda, financial agenda, and an ego bigger than this room could have possibly been President of the United States of America. If there's any good that can possibly come out of Sand Creek, it's that. I'm Tom Hayden. I'm the great-great-grandson of John Evans, the only grandson, great-great-grandson, because they're all women in my family. So, and I've learned a lot today. There's some really intelligent, smart people in this room that have been on this stage. And I want to thank everybody that put this whole thing together, everyone that was involved, everyone that came and spoke today. But I wanted to call attention to briefly the John Evans study. It was in the first panel discussion where it was pointed out that it was homegrown, that it was generic, and that there was no boilerplate thing that they pulled off the shelf and said, this is how we're going to do a study for this institution on the indigenous people. And they made it up as they went along. And people that came together for the first time, and I'm so full of faces and names, I don't remember who they were on that first panel, but it was incredible, the need, and for everyone to all of a sudden realize this is something we have to do. We don't have a choice. And I think the fact that it is homegrown is incredibly important. And it will continue. That I know. So we'll talk more later.
My name's Gail originally, and the name of Two Eagles. My father was part Cheyenne and Arapaho, and our family name was Ridge Bear. And half my family still use that name, but when the government placed us on the reserve and took our Indian names away and gave us names like Smith, Brown, trying to do some Americana on us with names, then a lot of the records were destroyed. So they lined you up, and some of us kept the name rigidly, and some Ridge Bear, which is Cheyenne Record. And my mother had roots with the Oglala Sioux. And also, her relations were involved with Wounded Knee Massacre. And kind of think now, when I first talked this morning, I drove my father to Lamar. I was living in Idaho at the time, and he needed a ride. And I had a couple weeks off from work, so I came home and drove him down to that meeting. Been involved ever since. And when I first started, Joe was there. We discussed it. And everything just came upon, I always say milestones. Mr. Hallis was here. He was with the Historical Society then, And he got involved quite a bit with the Colorado Historical Society Museum. From that day on, it's now here. But another real special milestone was breaking bread with the Evans family up at the fort a few months back. It was it was something that came about. It was very special. We all sat around and what we're doing right now, doing dialogue. Got a really good feeling. My brother wanted to be here too, because he was at that meeting. Coming to give me his regards too. But it was a special time in this milestone. So I'm really honored to be up there on the stage with you, because 150 years ago, there was a lot of uncertainty on both sides. History with tribal peoples, not dead history. There's a lot. As an educator, I generally look at it as you got to be honest. And with the Massacre project, or with you, it's been done in a very respectful way, because the Cheyenne Arapaho people look at Sand Creek as a sacred site. Sacred site where everything sent us in different directions, but we still maintain, and we're struggling with the languages. But one of the most sacred things is our ceremonies we still hold on to. And like I related this morning, all our medicines, pipes, were burned at Sand Creek. Whatever the survivors took, that's what we have to take to pass on. And these mountains, when I drive down here from Wyoming, down the mountains and all these other mountains, it's real strong. Our medicines are still there. That's the part. Sacred. That's the word.
My name is
There you go.
My name is Tamara Pearson-Wistray, and again, I'm the co-director of the Conflict Resolution Institute and a professor in the Joseph Corbell School of International Studies here. And I'm also the great-granddaughter of settler colonialists from Sweden who came to Lakota land in South Dakota. And I think I am starting to become more aware of why it is important for us to recognize those kinds of legacies and family histories. And thank you again for the permission to be on your land here today. I'd also like to thank those up here on the stage for their courage to be here, all of you. And I'd like to thank all of you for being here as well. So we have a few questions that we have asked you all to think about ahead of time. And we also will get 2 questions from the audience. But we'd like to begin first with, Gail, you mentioned the meeting that you all had. We're aware that you all engaged in a kind of joint conversation last fall. And I'd ask you to reflect on that process of coming together and what that meant to you, and also what it might mean in our larger community. So, who would like to start?
We at the fort, we met with the descendants of the Evans family. We invited them to participate in our Thursday Healing Run. And at the end of the run, we were going to have a powwow at the Sheraton downtown. We invited them to our powwow there. But when we were there, we met each other, and it was a real breathtaking moment. I'm a direct descendant of war bonnet, white antelope, red leaf. I know these people. I know where they're buried. Back in Oklahoma, they made it. They made it through the Sand Creek. They went to Paladora Canyon, Adobe Walls, and the Washita in Cheyenne, Oklahoma. They made it. They survived. They survived north. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting here today. So I'm direct descendant of the Sand Creek Massacre, the people that was there, actually there. And these people here are our friends. And I say they're our friends because what happened a long time ago was history. And it probably went down in part of the report. But I like to take my time down. Ha-ho. Ha-ho. And ha-ho for being here. Thank you.
I can remember the meeting real clear. We were asked to come to Colorado and take part in something over there in CU. And we were gone from Oklahoma for about 17 days. We were getting tired. And we had to go back to the site. And we were looking for artifacts. We were anxious for all this to be over so we could go back home. And be with our family again, you know. And then we got a phone call from Kenny. Her last name's Kenny. Holly Arnold Kenny. Asked us if we could come back to Denver. And we were tired. And I tell you what, I'm glad we went back. We were tired. That evening we drove back over here. And we had a nice private rib buffalo dinner. With a couple margaritas. But we had shared tears. That was something really great because you knew they weren't just, you knew they were sincere about what they were saying. You know, our hearts were together. They were at the same point of sadness. We could understand each other. And there's a lady that, I'm not sure if she's here or not, but she started crying. She about made me cry. So I got up and I went and gave her a hug. And told her to let this go. I know they had a lot on their mind, but I know after that day, they had a sign of relief. Something that they would have to carry for the rest of their life that they just let go right there. That we were all human. And I just wanted them to know that I would hate for any of my family to live like that. Put something in their heart like that. I just wanted them to have relief. There's a lot of things that I don't even wish on my worst enemy. One of them is heartache. That's the toughest. So I was glad that we got to be friends. The main thing, we're tear brothers. We healed. We had good healing that day. That's my experience from that day. It was worth the trip back to Denver. We were tired. But Joe and I rode together back over here. We were so happy we came back. We had my little boy with us and he was running around, spilling things. We took him out to the United Methodist Conference with us. I don't believe they have kids running around in there, but they accepted him. And I could see different people taking care of him while we were up there, trying to give him a pencil and write on paper and stuff. But they accepted us in a good way, and they let my son run around and break all the rules. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
All right, so I first learned about Sand Creek when I was 8 years old, and my parents took me out to the historic site. And at that point, I didn't really understand the connection between my ancestor and the atrocity that occurred. But of course, as I got older, I began to make connections, and then so our meeting at the fort really gave me an opportunity to put faces to all of these stories and all of these historical documents that I've been studying for pretty much my whole life. Yeah, I think healing is very multidimensional. It's very personal. So each person deals with it in their own way and on their own. But it also offers opportunities for conversation and discussion. And then so our meeting at the fort was just the perfect opportunity for that, because from our conversation that we had, we each had our own interpretations of what happened at Sand Creek, and during our discussion, we were just able to talk about all of our experiences and just really discuss from both sides of the story.
I'm going to talk next.
Told you I'd come for women.
I don't know how to turn it on. It's got a green light. And so first, I'm so happy to hear from my brothers here, my friends here, that the meeting at the fort was a good one for them as well, because it was really significant for me and for the rest of the family as well. And I want to honor my sister, who's not here today, who helped to put that together with Holly. She's friends with Holly, and that's kind of how that meeting came about. And one of the big wonderful things about that meeting was there were numerous people from my family who had never really engaged with what Sand Creek was, and had certainly never met any of the native people. And they got to see firsthand and hear and listen and shed tears together. And it broadened the conversation. I know that Tom and I and several other people in the family have known about Sand Creek for 20 or 30 years and have traveled down to the site and have actually traveled on the first spiritual healing run. Ava was there. And made sandwiches on the tailgates with the other Cheyenne and Arapaho women. And that was just so incredible to do that. And then to come back 15 years later and sit in council with these good people and listen to their stories firsthand and to shed the tears with them was so important. Just a milestone in our family as well. One of my cousins is a poet, and she read a very moving poem about her coming to know what had happened there. And she didn't expect anything to come of that poem, but she had made copies of the poem to give to everybody. And one of the people, and I think it was Chairman Al Addison, I can't remember, but I think it was him, who said, let's pass our copies of this poem around and everybody sign it. It's our new treaty. And so our family and the Cheyenne and Arapaho people have a new treaty, and it's a poem. And it doesn't say anything about what either of our families have to do other than acknowledge what happened. And so that's what I feel is the most important thing, is the acknowledgement that yes, it happened. My great-great-grandfather was as culpable as the report says, and I believe more so. From my own feeling life, I feel that there's even more there than is factual in there. And just to be able to say that and honor the descendants of the people that this happened to is a remarkable step in everything that we've been talking about today, to bring that forward. I think that's it for now.
I didn't make the fort or the prime rib or the margaritas. My journey started probably 30 years ago, and it's important to know that a lot of us, most of us, did not grow up with any knowledge or recognition of the Sand Creek Massacre. And that goes for Henry Littlebird's story too. And that it was always something that was swept under the rug. It was pushed away, you didn't talk about it. And if you did talk about it, you didn't learn very much besides the governor got mixed up with that Shivington guy. And that was the end of his political career. And that's all that I could learn from my grandmother, my mother. And so I began to read, and I think that's what we've come so far. And since I started my journey with this 30 years ago, I read everything I could. And I found out the governor was indeed very culpable. And there are people in my family that would say, do you think he knew anything about it? Because he was gone. He left and gone back to Washington, D.C. And it bothered me because I'm thinking, well, of course he knew. Read the history. Of course he knew. There's no denying it. And when you read the American Native history, it's the truth. And it's simple and it's straightforward. It's mostly based on oral history. You read the white man's history, and it is full of holes. Interpretation all over the place. You can take it any way you want. It's like data. You can make data do whatever you want. You read the white man's history of the Sand Creek Massacre, you come away with 20 different opinions. The fact is, there was no getting out of this, and it would bother me. And it bothered me, and my wife, who I just married, knew that, and she took me out there in the early 80s, and we visited the site, and there was nothing but a stone monument and a barbed wire fence with some cows running around. And I befriended some very, very wonderful Native Americans, and I told them that it was something I didn't think that I could ever be at peace with, knowing that my great-great-grandfather was so involved. He set the stage. He choreographed it. He did everything he could to pull the trigger. And he might as well have done that. Which is why I'm so grateful for the John Evans DU report that I think did not turn its head on what they could have. And it's nasty and it hurts. Well, I got lucky because medicine man took me to a sweat lodge, and I'll never forget, he had 2 questions. He said, do you have any heart conditions? Is your heart good? I said, yeah. And he said, second one is, do you believe in the power of prayer? And so it was about an hour and 3/4, almost 2 hours. I don't know exactly, it was all in their foreign native tongue. I don't know what they did, what you guys did to me. It worked. So, and I left it there then. And I've been blessed. I've been lucky because I got to share my knowledge, and I know that Henry Littlebird is taking a point to teach his grandchildren. And that's why I took my daughter out there in 1999 for the first healing run and exposed her to the truth so that she could meet these fine brothers of ours and know that there is a way forward. So that's my story.
I'd like to, again, compliment with Mr. Hayden here. You know, meeting we had up in the fort. It's very respectful to me when I left my brothers and we all left. Feeling really, really good, you know. The people that were on opposite sides, 1864, you know, that 150 years. It's not, like I say, it's not too long, you know. And we sat and talked. You know, again, you know, I really, there was some tears, you know. And to me, it was kind of emotional, but I didn't want to, wasn't expected to. At first, before we went over, we talked about it with my brothers, and we didn't know how to react to the situation that we're going to be at the gathering. But look at our ancestors that survived it and passed it on to the other generation. They were forgiven. They forgave what happened, you know. But they didn't forget. And getting to that point, you know, we don't want to ever forget our ancestors, because we're here right now, all of us are here because our ancestors brought us to this moment, you know. And have a good mentor who passed away a few years ago. And he said, Native people remember and memorialize the struggles of their ancestors at Sand Creek, Washita, and Wounded Knee. The places are sanctified because of those sacrifices. Every society needs these kinds of sacred places because they help instill a sense of social cohesion in the people and remind them of the passage of generations that have brought them to the present. A society that cannot remember and honor its past is in peril of losing its soul. This was said by a blind DeLorean 30 years ago. So what I'm saying is, we're there that day. We remembered, like, what I'm doing with my grandchildren is passing it on to them. They ask me, like Henry, they're very inquisitive, you know. And when I'm leaving, they say, "Going to Sand Creek again?" Yeah, okay. Don't forget to bring me a surprise. So, but I think of that because my nephew just left here a few moments ago, and he really made me think about that, because he was talking about his little kids. I thought about that too, because I see my grandkids full of life, and to have them be butchered in front of me, you know, that's not worth me living on, you know. And a few years back, we had a meeting down at the Capitol with the legislature, and I was sitting by the window there looking out on Broadway and Colfax. 150 years ago, soldiers come through on that route, and people were out there cheering them on, carrying little babies' heads, women's body parts, men's body parts on staff, you know, sticks, you know, displaying them, you know, and giving them victory parade, you know. And the so-called civilized people clapping. And man, that is really really hard to think about, you know. And I think about it all the time, you know, when I come to Denver, you know. Think about it all the time. courtyard down here, and it's right where my great-grandfather camped, you know. Thinking about the stories about when he camped down there, what he did in that area, you know, it kind of gave me a comfort, you know. Comfort us, man, and just, you know, okay here, you know. They could have put us in another hotel, but we're close to, you know, good feelings. And today, I prayed real hard before I came over. I didn't know what I was going to have to say, you know. But it takes a lot of spirit and a lot of heart for Nancy Bishop Stanowski to stand up and not defend Sand Creek, but to start that healing process out with their writings, their help, you know, because it's going to go a long ways. It ain't going to stop, you know. The story is going to continue some milestones, you know. We're going to be back here in 3 weeks and continue on with Dr. Roberts' manuscript, book, or whatever. The first time I read Dr. Roberts' dissertation, 1,000 pages, I went back to chapter 3. I remember it real good. Boy, I was so furious, you know. I threw that book down and I walked out my house and I went straight to the bar, bought a case of beer, bottle of whiskey, got out of it. You know. I cried. But I know how my nephew now feels. You know. But he's healing. Yet he's an Indian warrior, you know. Fought in a war. Right here, he felt hard for his people. Sitting here talking, you know. But you know, it gives me courage and to say what oral histories are really about, what was transferred to me from my elders, you know. I feel it. They always said never quit, never back down, you know. But it's hard at times.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to add anything more to the conversation or to the reflections on the conversation last fall?
I would like to hear some questions.
Yeah, we're going to move to questions in just a minute.
Okay.
If there's any last thoughts about that conversation, and then I think we had one last question that maybe we should move to next.
So I just want to say thank you again to the panelists for being here and for sharing your stories. It's just, I'm feeling really moved myself, and it makes me think of a teaching from an elder from my tribe who said to me one time, when I was having a tough time, she said that a warrior's greatest strength is her willingness to be publicly vulnerable. And so I'm thinking about that a lot right now with all of the stories that you're sharing and just what it means to acknowledge this history. And thank you again for sharing from your heart, because that's what we're hearing right now, our heart words. So, as I mentioned before, the historical trauma can't be isolated to a single group, but rather has ripple effects out to everybody because we're all connected. And one of the ways that we are talking about it in my community of Indigenous scholars in terms of healing is through narrative, through story. That narrative, our stories, are our medicine, and that they actually work to interrupt that intergenerational transmission of trauma. And so what we're seeing here is that process, and it's so exciting. And so in that spirit of narrative, I've heard folks say a lot today how important the acknowledgement has been of this history. And on an earlier panel, you spoke about the impact of the governor's apology, or the panelists also spoke about the impact of the governor's apology, and also how the DU report has changed conversations. Can you reflect on where we've come through these narratives, and maybe where you see the path forward for us all, for yourselves and for your communities and for the rest of us?
Well, I'm real happy that the John Evans report was great. We were trying to make an image of ourselves that we didn't want to point fingers anymore. We didn't want to expose anybody else. You know, we wanted to start healing. You know, so that was, you know, to me, the John Evans report just kind of opened up the can of worms again a little bit. You know, I'm glad you guys did it. If that made you feel better, you know. I guess what I'm trying to say is, I believe once we stop the way pointing fingers and trying to make a person look bad for some reason, we can't heal. We have to make it. We have to make a different approach. Like I said, that was a good thing. You know, there was a man, a lawyer here, who was trying to start a ruffle the feathers around here about John Evans. He wanted to have a study, actually the whole campus vote in on whether he was guilty or not. You know, a big thing like that. And I thought, well, that's just about the time we decided we're going to let all this go. We're going to move forward. And so I guess some people stopped him from doing what he was doing, and then we got the John Evans report. But, well, I appreciate it that they acknowledged. You know, everybody, in my heart, it's good and it's bad.
I read part of Gary Roberts' report, and we did a lot of amendments to it at the last meeting we had in Billings, Montana. So he's rewriting it. When he comes out with it June 1st, we'll have the report, 1,000-page report. But that's just part of getting all this together to help heal what happened, the tragedy of the Snake Creek Massacre a long time ago. It's just part of the healing process. This right here is part of the healing process too. This right here makes me feel real good. Makes me feel really, really good. And to be sitting with a descendant stuff, John Evans, that's even better. So everything about this meeting is good. I hope.
I want to speak about the governor's apology. I traveled with the Cheyenne and Arapaho more as a witness this year than as a sandwich maker on the spiritual healing run, and was there at the Capitol steps and had no idea that Governor Hickenlooper was going to speak an apology. And as he did, and especially as I heard that he had gotten the permission of all of the living governors, I wept. And there were so many of us just crying there on the steps. Because somehow, as a descendant of John Evans, no matter how much I apologize personally, it was he as governor who did those actions and did the omissions, the inactions that created the situation of such atrocities. And so for the governor, the current governor, to come forward and apologize, I felt the centuries come together, and it felt there were these lodges there in front of the Capitol building, and there were the Cheyenne and Arapaho young people freezing in that cold wind after they had run all the way from Riverside Cemetery. And there was this amazing coming together of the generations at that point. And I felt the presence of my great-great-grandfather. And I don't know if he would now still hold the position that he held then. We'll never know that. But I felt that apology extend all the way through the generations. And was so grateful that that could happen. And then I also want to honor Bishop Elaine and all of the Methodists, because that's the spiritual side of my great-great-grandfather. And again, I can't do anything about that, but the Methodist Church has stepped forward with such courage and just going through the fire to speak what they need to speak and to meet and to go to the site and to take all of their people to the site. What an amazing thing that they're doing. So that's the spiritual side of my great-great-grandfather. And so what can we as a family offer, I feel, is the emotional part. And just as a woman feeling, as you speak of the children there and the women and children there at the site of the massacre, I cry every time, and I will always remember them. It was spoken today that there was a woman there who said, "Remember us." And I hear her words, and I remember them every day, every day. And I too raised my children, my daughter's here in the audience, and I raised my children to know what happened, and we remember all of them. And then the land itself is such an important part of the healing process. And somebody in a previous question and answer period had suggested to rename Evans Avenue, and I kind of laugh. And it really doesn't matter to us as a family. And oh, by the way, I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for the rest of the family. It might matter to a lot of the families about that. So, but the names that are on our human things don't matter much. But what I would like to say, and this is just me personally saying this, is there's a mountain that's named Mount Evans. And should the Arapaho and the Cheyenne and the Ute people, whose land I believe it is on, come forward with their name for that mountain, that would be something significant. Forget the cement. So I thank you all, and I particularly thank those who put this together. And I also want to say one other thing that our family can give to this whole conversation is sitting here, and I'm going to embarrass her terribly, but my niece, Laurel, has dedicated her life and her career to Indigenous rights. And what an amazing thing to come 150 years later through. You've seen what my great-great-grandfather was capable of, and now you see that he has, I believe you're 6 generations later, a young woman who is dedicating her life to the rights of these people. So that too is a gift from our family. And as we move forward, I would not want to presume that there's anything that I could think of that you would want, or that we could do for you. But as you tell us what you want and how you want our family to contribute to the continued healing, that's where I would like it to come from, is from the tribes themselves and from the people themselves. And I've spoken at great length with Otto Braided Hair about the languages, about keeping the language alive. And I have a great passion for the sacred sites. And there are so many places where I feel that we as a family could throw our weight, and the reparations too. If the Evans family could throw their weight behind making whatever form of reparations are going to happen. Those are some places that I've heard that we might be able to step forward. But we don't want to sit up here with mere words. We want to offer our actions into the future.
Thank you, sister. Yeah, you can give my daughter away, that's fine. She can go with my blessing. We think about, what has happened in 150 years. I talked about when I began this journey 30 years ago. Since then, 30 years, there's been another dozen books published. All these papers written. Gary Roberts announced in Northwestern in this DU report. And it's all been good. It's all been good. All but a couple of books. There's a couple of books I didn't like to read. But when you look at what happened 150 years ago and what is happening now, we are a better society, as hard as that may be to recognize. If somebody were to commit a crime like that today, not only would they be in a lot of trouble, but they would be chastised. And we would have this thing called victims' assistance there to help the victims of the crime. And we didn't have that then. I think we have that now. I couldn't agree more with my sister Ann about it's time for the Cheyenne and the Arapaho, for them to tell us, the white perpetrators of the crime, what it is that we can do now 150 years later for them. An apology is not enough without some action. And there's some low-hanging fruit out there. We talked about it today. Professor Reed talked about his list of 20 things that were obtainable. When you look at how far we've gone in the last 3 years since this whole discussion began, and how much farther we can go and get in the next 3 years, I think we've got a lot to be proud of. And I like to speak on the positive side of such a atrocity, if it can be done. I think that everybody's heart is together, and I think that there's good opportunity here. What I take from it is what I've learned. I've learned how to become a different person, a better listener. I've learned how to become able to sit in a room and listen to an individual address an issue when the rest of the room is opposed to his point of view, and give him the opportunity to express his opinion. Come to find out, he was right. I couldn't have done it if I hadn't gone through this whole experience with understanding what happened 150 years ago. So there's a little bit of good that can come out of this now and then. I will say, I'll give you my commitment that anything that I can do to further this discussion, to further anything as I call the low-hanging fruit, and as much as I would question whether renaming a concrete street or a mountain is going to be very difficult and very, forget about politically a bomb, but it could be good, because then everybody would know about Sanskrit. There are thousands of people within half a mile of here, right now outside these doors, that don't know about Sanskrit. And so if it hit the headlines, you're going to rename the mountain, or you're going to rename a concrete street, I agree with my sister, who cares? These are just material things. But if it's going to educate and bring that awareness up, and some good can come out of it, I'll get behind that. I'll help you. I'll help my brothers however I can. So, thank you.
Okay, now, in the healing process too, just today, the reservation life is they have a hard problem with social dysfunctions, alcoholism, drugs. The one that really is concerning to tribal leaders is suicide. South Dakota has over 200 suicides on their reservations as of now. One example that hits home to me is when back in 1985, I was the principal of a school called St. Stephen's Indian School, and that year that same school, there was 16 suicides. All young men. Some of the students that I taught, some of the students that related to. And I moved to Phoenix for 10 years, 1985. And when I came back to St. Stephen's, again, I went to the principalship for 3 years. And back in 1984, getting back to 1985, there was a nun and a priest that were at the cemetery, and they were doing, they were averaging all of the death rate of all of the people in that cemetery, Catholic cemetery. And she came to visit me one day, and she said, "You know, we're done. And all the people that's buried out there across the road, average age is 34 years old." That was 1985. Then I came back home 10 years later, and you know, the CDC has a lot of other records, you know, with social dysfunctions, whatnot. And I went to my doctor years ago for my 6-month checkup, you know, so you see if I'm okay in this way. But she said they just finished a study with the Indian Public Health Service, and the average death, 34 years old. And I was 1984 to now, 2014, 34 mortality rate. And that comes to the healing part. It comes to the healing part, because on reservations, when you're poorest people, you can't get your hopes up high. It goes into hopelessness. You lose your spirituality. And it's easy to fall prey to drugs and alcohol, domestic violence, child abuse, and the list goes on. But the awareness now, and I really truly believe now, to think about, it's a generational trauma that happened to our people, not necessarily at St. Creek, but back years, up to a certain year, our tribe was only like 1,300 people, Northern Rappos. Then everybody said, "Wow," when it was 3,000. Now it's a little over 10,000 now, but that's trauma too, right there. You know. The U.S. government destroyed millions of Native Americans, exterminated complete tribes, language, and culture on the coast in California. So everywhere on Indian country, there's those really deep wounds, and we as people that are concerned about it, talk about it, but really have meaning and heart, that want to see something done. It's going to take a long time. 1985 to last year was 34 years mortality rate on that reservation in that cemetery. That's really hard. Then all of this comes down to trauma. you can be trained as a clinical, mental, but as a practitioner, you know, it has to start with the home, the tribe, home base. But one thing that I never give up on is our spirituality, our prayer and ceremonies that we hold on to. That's where I'm at right now, from historical. But again, you know, I really appreciate you guys. It's been a really good audience in all four sessions today. And, if I was a professor, I'd give them an A. I see this guy coming out. He was doing one. He was going back to grade his papers. He was going to give a few one-legged A's.
Well, thank you. Let there not be another Sand Creek. We don't need another Washita. We don't need another Wounded Knee. It's time we recognize the truths, and I think that's the first step, is recognition. It's time to move on. It is what it is, as they say today. And I think now is the opportunity not to get bogged down in 3,000-page documents. I know enough. And that is, it's time to go to work.
Thank you. So, one more.
You want to go that way?
Well, here, I get three of them.
All right, so after studying international human rights and learning about all of the mass atrocities that occur, you know, one of the hardest things for me to grapple with and understand was that my ancestor was one of those people who was perpetuating these human rights violations. And even though they weren't recognized as violations at the time, you know, they have effects today. And, you know, they, like we were saying, those effects are just so evident on the reservations and within the American Indian people. And, you know, my Cheyenne and Arapaho friends have taught me not to feel guilty. And I don't, but I do feel responsible. And I think that all of us should feel responsible. I think, you know, reading history books is amazing, and that's, you know, I love history. I love reading about Western history, but, you know, we have to connect these historical documents and these historical stories into, you know, contemporary society and how that is causing these structural and symbolic violences within the you know, U.S. federal government between and connected to the American Indian society.
Thank you for all your wisdom. I'd like to ask you permission for us to go just maybe 10 minutes longer so that we can take some questions from the floor. 10 minutes? 10 minutes, okay? May I ask your permission to go 10 minutes longer? If you need to leave, go ahead, but we'd like to be able to take at least a couple of questions from the floor. Yes.
This is a suggestion about renaming anything named Devils. John Nichols was one of the commanders of one of the units, and he helped found University of Colorado. So in recognition, they
named a dormitory after him. And about 20 years ago, they suddenly realized that his role in Sand Creek meant that that was an inappropriate thing. So they renamed the dormitory Cheyenne Arapaho, but they misspelled Arapaho, and they have failed despite many requests to change the spelling. So if you choose to push for a name change, be sure that the USGS or the City of Denver actually spells the name correctly that you want to change it to.
Could I just make one response?
I don't know if this, oh, it's working, thank goodness. The changing of names, I would want to say, let it not erase the history. And ask the Native people if that's what they want first. And be sure that it doesn't just try to erase our knowledge and acknowledgement of the history.
Are there others on the panel that might also want to speak to the question of name changing?
In Boulder, on the campus, there are to change two names to the last, in honor and recognition of our last Arapaho chiefs in the Boulder area, to Left Hand and Little Raven. And this seems like it's not on, is it?
It's okay.
Okay, so I've met with the Chancellor DeStefano, and I think the holdup is that the orthography, I had to learn that word, it's a big word to me. It's how it looks, it's the linguistic phonetic spelling of Left Hand and Little Raven. Left Hand would be N-O-W, I can't remember, but it has a backwards 3 in there. And Little Raven is Hosa, Chief Hosa. And that is really simple. It's H-O-O-S-O-O with the English phonetics below it. So, I mean, this is an educational facility that is having a hard time deciding how to put these names up there. They want to put the names in English, Left Hand dorm and Little Raven dorm. And the families are okay with that, but the CU professors would like to have it using the orthography as the major name on the plaques. So it's, even though it came from the university, this idea, and as a descendant of both of these chiefs, they were first cousins. It's hard to get a move on, you know. Every time I see one of the officials, you know, what's the status of it, and the regents are having a hard time coming to that decision to have renaming of these dorms. But everyone is really appreciative of the renaming of the dorms, and hopefully I'll get to do a 15-minute educational video to talk about the history of Arapahoes in the Boulder area and in Colorado. And also there's a small town by the name of Niwot, which is a mispronunciation of Nawat, which is left hand in Arapaho. And I did, they're installing a huge rock with a metal plaque in it talking about the history of Arapahoes in that area in Nawat. So there's starting to be, I think, thanks to recognition and education of Sand Creek by all people, more recognition of our existence in this area. Thank you.
I wanted to thank the panelists for their beautiful conversation.
Can't hear you.
And all the discussions this afternoon.
Can't hear you.
It's been quite amazing. But I wanted to speak particularly to Gail's point. 34 years as an average life expectancy is somewhere between, means that other people get to live 2 lives for every life lived on the reservation. Or take European length lives, 77, 78, 2 1/3. That's a way of putting the issue of inequality to a stage. That real effort
all kinds of shared effort in teaching exchanges, in students coming from the reservations, are being involved, and money needs to be put into transforming this. And the whole philosophy, which is why we said here about how government can do no good, well, if we press it, maybe it can do some good, because this has to be changed. And I just throw that out as a way of looking at it and making it comment on it.
I just wanted to make, can you hear me? I just wanted to make a comment about the suicide and what's happening in Indian country. Where I teach, it's central to 3 Ojibwe reservations in Minnesota, and we have suicide also in epidemic proportions, as well as diabetes. And I work a lot with the tribal governments and some of the leaders, and what I see that needs to happen is the parents need to be distinguished as parents. They need to be very clear to their young people that they are not their friend, but that they are their first teachers. And then I see the elders, that they need to be leaders, because there are such few elders left in most Indian communities. And then I see also that at these institutions, when we bring in Native students, there has to be some services that provide for them almost like mental health support, because they're coming from war zones. Some of the reservations, their poverty is very intense. So we can't think that we're going to mainstream and that this is the solution. So my deepest advice for my heart is, when we do this, we bring our students, education really is one of our answers, but we need educators that also come from that culture. We need educators that are Native, Indigenous. They need to be the leaders, they need to be the elders, their words need to be heard, and they need to be respected. And I don't want to be disrespectful about the healing that has already taken place here, but I think that one of the tough conversations is white privilege. How do we discuss that so that it's a very broad topic and it's not just isolated to DU, but that it permeates the communities where Indian people live, because they're the ones who are suffering. So I just wanted to say that, because we, Native people, are in a very critical time right now, and they do need support. So I want to thank everyone here who is interested in providing